The night was dead quiet, then my driveway exploded in orange. I jumped to the window just as heat slammed the glass. My car, I breathed. Flames were crawling up the hood of my $1 million Lamborghini Fire, snapping like it was alive. Smoke rolled into the sky, thick and black. Outside, a voice laughed. "Holy it's actually burning," a young man said, breathless, excited. I focused through the dark. Sterling Pritchard, 20 years old, hoodie up, gas can still swinging from his hand. His friend whispered, panicking, "Dude, we should go." Sterling shook his head, grinning. "Relax. Cameras here don't work. HOA made sure of that." I raised my phone, already recording. "You think you're untouchable now?" he muttered, staring at the fire. "Think this makes you big?" Another voice yelled, "Sterling, cops." They ran. Tires screeched. The flames roared higher. I didn't move, didn't shout, didn't chase. I just watched the inferno and tapped one button. Because Sterling didn't know the truth yet. He didn't know the entire street was covered. He didn't know the cloud backup was live. And he definitely didn't know who had already been notified or how fast the law was about to catch up to him. Gwendolyn Pritchard stepped out of the HOA SUV like she was arriving at a crime scene she already controlled. Red blazer, pearl earrings, clipboard tucked tight against her chest. "Gwendolyn Pritchard," she announced to the fire captain, cutting in before I could speak. "President of the Riverside Estates Homeowners Association." She turned to me, next, eyes, cold voice clipped. "You're gonna stay back, sir. This is an HOA-managed situation now." I stared at her. My car is still burning. She didn't look at the wreckage. She didn't look at the firefighters. She looked at me like I was the problem. "This incident," she said, tapping her clipboard, "is the result of repeated non-compliance and provocation. We've had ongoing issues with your property." "Provocation?" I repeated. "Someone just committed arson." Gwendolyn sighed the way people do when they're tired of explaining rules to someone beneath them. "My son made a mistake," she said flatly. "But let's be very clear, this didn't come out of nowhere." One of the officers frowned. "Ma'am, are you admitting?" She raised a hand, stopping him. "I'm stating context. Context matters." She finally glanced at the charred remains of my Lamborghini, lips pursed. "Excess," she added quietly. "Displays like this tend to agitate the community." I felt it then, not anger, not shock, control. This wasn't about a car. It wasn't even about her son. It was about a woman who had spent years using the HOA as a weapon, and believed down to her bones that she could still decide who belonged here, even after the fire. The fire trucks left before sunrise, but Gwendolyn stayed. She stood at the edge of my driveway, heels planted on the asphalt, talking quietly with an HOA contractor, like they were discussing landscaping, not a crime scene. When I stepped closer, she turned sharply. "You need to understand something," she said. "This neighborhood runs on standards." I looked at the blackened concrete, the melted tire marks, the smell of gasoline still hanging in the air. "Your son just tried to burn my house down." She lowered her voice. "And you've been pushing this community since the day you arrived." That was how it started. By noon, the first notice appeared in my mailbox: improper exterior lighting, citing a security camera mounted above my garage. The letter claimed it violated community aesthetics. At 3:40 p.m., another email followed. Driveway obstruction. Apparently, the fire damage and debris made my property visually disruptive. The next morning, I caught a man in an HOA vest standing on my lawn, snapping photos with his phone. "Who sent you?" I asked. He didn't answer, just pointed to the street. "HOA compliance," he said, like that explained everything. I documented it all: timestamps, photos, emails, silence on my end. That afternoon, Gwendolyn knocked for the first time. "I'm trying to help you," she said, lips tight. "If you cooperate, this can all calm down. Cooperate with what I asked." She glanced past me into my garage. "With understanding that you don't live alone here. This isn't a place for statements." "Statements," I repeated. She smiled, thin and practiced. "Cars like yours, cameras, lawyers, they create tension." When she left, another notice hit my phone: failure to remediate post-incident hazards within 24 hours. A fine attached. A warning about escalation. That was when it clicked. This wasn't retaliation. This was pressure, slow, procedural, and designed to make me fold without ever raising her voice. The first certified letter arrived 2 days later. Notice of formal review, HOA board action pending. I was still sweeping ash from my driveway when my phone buzzed. An email from the HOA secretary, carbon copied to the entire board, informing me that my property had been flagged for accelerated compliance oversight. That phrase showed up 3 times in the message, like saying it often enough would make it real. By evening, Gwendolyn had escalated from solo intimidation to institutional force. 2 board members appeared at my gate with clipboards and forced smiles. They didn't knock. They stood just outside the boundary line, phones raised, taking photos. "You can't photograph my property without permission," I said. One of them, a man I'd never met, shrugged. "Common areas are visible from the street. This isn't a common area." He avoided my eyes. "That's under review." The next morning, an inspection window was posted to my HOA portal, 48 hours mandatory access required. Failure to comply would result in fines up to and including lien consideration. I called the HOA office. The secretary answered, voice tight. "I'm just following instructions." "Whose?" A pause. Then quieter, "The president's." That afternoon, the neighborhood shifted. People I'd waved to suddenly crossed the street. A woman I'd spoken to once pulled her kids closer when she saw me. Fear travels fast when power tells it where to go. That night, another email hit, this one labeled Board Vote Notice. The agenda listed one item: reclassification of access route adjacent to Lot 47. I stared at the screen. They weren't just harassing me anymore. They were laying groundwork, slow, legal-looking groundwork, to take something that didn't belong to them and daring me to stop it. I didn't argue with the board vote. I downloaded the attachment. That's where they made their mistake. The document looked official, letterhead, parcel numbers, neat diagrams, but the map was wrong, subtly wrong. The access route they wanted to reclassify cut across my land at an angle that didn't exist in the county records. I pulled the original survey from when I bought the property, then the county GIS file, then the easement history going back 20 years. The lines didn't match. Someone had shifted the boundary by just under 12 feet. Not enough for a casual glance to catch, but enough to convert my private access into shared infrastructure. I called the county clerk. She was quiet for a long moment after I read her the filing number. "That submission hasn't cleared review," she said slowly. "Who told you it was approved?" "The HOA president." Another pause. Then lower, "Sir, that document was uploaded yesterday under an HOA bulk permit tied to a multi-phase utility expansion." My grip tightened on the phone. "What kind of expansion?" "Stormwater rerouting and fiber conduit," she said. "Projected value is in the low 7 figures once state matching funds clear." There it was. They didn't want order. They didn't want compliance. They wanted leverage. My land was the last obstacle between them and a development payout big enough to make careers and erase accountability. That night, I finally felt it. Not panic, not fear, cold anger. I replayed every citation, every photo, every inspection. It wasn't random. It was pressure calibrated and timed. Push until I signed. Escalate until I broke. I opened my laptop and started a new folder. Easement fraud, forged submission, financial motive. At the bottom, I added one more file. Witnesses, because someone always talks when money's involved. And now I knew exactly what question to ask. The county surveyor showed up the next morning. Unmarked truck, mud on the tires, clipboard that looked older than the HOA itself. He walked the boundary in silence while I followed a few steps behind, watching him stop, kneel, measure, then shake his head. "These stakes don't belong here," he said, finally pointing at the red flags the HOA had planted. "They're off by a wide margin." "How wide?" I asked. He straightened, checking his notes. "Enough to matter in court." That afternoon, my attorney called. "I pulled the HOA's submission," she said. "It's bad, really bad." She paused. "They filed an amended easement map without homeowner consent, without a third-party survey, and without a recorded board quorum." "That's fraud," I said. "Yes," she replied. "And because the project ties into county infrastructure funding, it escalates." By evening, the pressure doubled. A code enforcement officer knocked, polite, professional, but firm. He handed me a notice citing unpermitted land use interference based entirely on the HOA's altered map. "I don't think this holds," he said quietly, lowering his voice. "But my hands are tied until the records are clarified." I watched him leave, then checked my phone. 3 missed calls, 2 voicemails, 1 email marked urgent. Gwendolyn. Her message was calm, almost friendly. "Let's resolve this privately," she said. "The board is prepared to be generous if you cooperate. But if you keep involving outside parties, things could get complicated." That was the moment the line vanished. They weren't just pressuring me anymore. They were trying to scare me into silence before the wrong set of eyes looked too closely. I forwarded everything: surveyor notes, county discrepancies, the voicemail, and I CC'd one address that hadn't been on the thread before. Because once the system sees the truth, it doesn't unsee it. The email went out just after dawn, not just to the HOA board, to every homeowner. Subject clarification needed. Regarding easement filing, Lot 47. No accusations, no emotion, just documents. The altered easement map showing my land shaved down by 11 feet. The original county survey proving it was false. The upload timestamp filed before any board vote. And the funding proposal attached to it, a $3.8 million utility project that suddenly made sense. Within minutes, my phone started vibrating across the kitchen counter. Why is my name on a quorum list? I never voted on this. They told us the county already approved it. By 6:40 a.m., the HOA website went dark. At 6:53, Gwendolyn called. I let it ring. Her voicemail came in sharp and furious. You had no right to send that. You've put community funding at risk. 10 minutes later, another message, lower, urgent. If you retract it now, we can still fix this. At 7:30, the county clerk called me directly. We've frozen the filing, she said. Oversight has been notified. That afternoon, a neighbor I barely knew knocked on my door. He didn't step inside, didn't give his name. They're shredding documents at the HOA office, he whispered. Boxes of them. At 5:58 p.m., a final email hit every inbox. Emergency AOA meeting tonight, 7:00 p.m. Mandatory attendance. No agenda, no explanation, just pressure. At 6:59, I walked into the community center. Every chair was filled. Phones were already recording. Gwendolyn stood at the podium, gripping the microphone like it might slip away from her. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. She spotted me and spoke before anyone else could. We're going to resolve this, she said evenly, right now. And the way her voice shook told me she already knew this wasn't going to end the way she planned. The room went quiet the moment I walked in. Every seat was filled. People stood shoulder to shoulder along the walls, phones already raised, red recording lights blinking like warning beacons. No one was talking anymore. Everyone was waiting. Gwendolyn didn't wait for the meeting to be called to order. She leaned into the microphone and smiled, tight, rehearsed. Let's address the confusion surrounding Lot 47 before misinformation spreads any further. Confusion. That was the word she chose. This HOA has always acted within its authority, she continued, voice smooth. What you're seeing is a routine administrative adjustment being deliberately mischaracterized. Low murmurs rippled through the crowd. A woman near the aisle whispered, then why did the website go down? Gwendolyn ignored it and clicked her remote. A slide appeared, no maps, no numbers, just bullet points. Vague, clean. This meeting is about restoring trust, she said, eyes finally locking onto mine, and ending unnecessary outside interference that threatens community funding. I stayed silent. A man in the second row stood up. If this is routine, why did the county freeze the filing this morning? Her smile twitched. She opened her mouth and stopped. The double doors at the back of the room swung open. Two county officials stepped inside, badges, visible folders tucked under their arms. Conversations died instantly. Even the phones stopped moving. One of them spoke clearly, his voice cutting through the room. This meeting is now part of an active county review. Gwendolyn's hand tightened around the microphone. For the first time that night, she didn't look in control. And everyone could see it. The county official didn't shout. He didn't argue. He simply opened his folder. We've reviewed the filing submitted by the Riverside Estates HOA regarding Lot 47, he said, his voice flat, professional. What we found raises serious concerns. Gwendolyn stepped toward the microphone. This is highly irregular. The board has not been given, ma'am, he said, holding up a hand. She froze. He turned to the audience and held up the first document. This is the easement map submitted to the county. Then he placed a second page beside it on the projector. And this is the officially recorded survey. A murmur rolled through the room. The boundary lines didn't align. One cut cleanly across land that everyone in that room knew didn't belong to the HOA. These alterations, the official continued, were filed without property owner consent, without a licensed surveyor's verification, and without a valid board quorum. A man stood up, his voice shaking. My name is on that quorum list. I never voted. So is mine, a woman added. I wasn't even in town. Phones rose higher. Someone cursed under their breath. The second county official stepped forward. The altered filing was directly tied to a proposed infrastructure and utility expansion valued at approximately $4 million. The room reacted instantly, gasps, whispers, disbelief. The official closed the folder. This constitutes material misrepresentation to the county. Silence followed. Every eye turned toward the podium, toward Gwendolyn, and for the first time since I'd met her, she looked like someone realizing the rules no longer applied in her favor. Gwendolyn laughed once. It came out sharp and brittle like something breaking. "This is being blown out of proportion," she said, gripping the podium. These were preliminary drafts. Nothing was finalized. One of the county officials didn't look at her. Then why were they submitted under penalty of perjury? Her mouth opened, closed. She turned to the board behind her. "You all knew about this. Don't sit there like you didn't." No one spoke. Warren Bellamy stared at the table. Celeste Hargrove shook her head slowly, refusing to meet her eyes. "This was your filing," the county official continued. "Your login, your authorization." Gwendolyn's voice rose. "I was acting for the good of the community. For funding," someone shouted from the back. "For control," another voice added. Her composure collapsed. "You don't understand how hard it is to keep this place in order." The room turned on her in a single motion, chairs, scraping voices overlapping phones, recording everything. The county official spoke again, louder now. "The HOA president is hereby removed from authority pending investigation. This matter is being referred for civil and criminal review." Gwendolyn slumped against the podium, color draining from her face. No one moved when it was over. Chairs stayed where they were. Phones lowered slowly, like people weren't sure what to do with their hands anymore. The room felt hollowed out, as if all the tension that had lived there for years had been pulled straight through the walls. A woman near the aisle turned and looked at me. Her eyes were wet. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "We should have spoken up." Others nodded. Not loudly, not dramatically, just small acknowledgments, guilt without excuses. For the first time since I'd moved here, I didn't feel watched. The knot in my chest loosened. My shoulders dropped. I realized I wasn't waiting for the next letter, the next citation, the next knock on my door. That constant readiness gone. Outside, the community center clusters of neighbors formed voices low and careful. No gossip, no victory laps. Just people processing the fact that silence had cost more than speaking ever would have. A man I barely knew stepped beside me. "She scared a lot of us," he said. "That's not an excuse. Just the truth." I nodded. I didn't need more. This wasn't triumph. It was something quieter. The moment when a community realizes it let control replace fairness and finally decides to breathe without it. No one moved when it was over. Chairs stayed where they were. Phones lowered slowly, like people weren't sure what to do with their hands anymore. The room felt hollowed out, as if all the tension that had lived there for years had been pulled straight through the walls. A woman near the aisle turned and looked at me. Her eyes were wet. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "We should have spoken up." Others nodded. Not loudly, not dramatically, just small acknowledgments, guilt without excuses. For the first time since I'd moved here, I didn't feel watched. The knot in my chest loosened. My shoulders dropped. I realized I wasn't waiting for the next letter, the next citation, the next knock on my door, that constant readiness gone. Outside, the community center clusters of neighbors formed voices low and careful. No gossip, no victory laps. Just people processing the fact that silence had cost more than speaking ever would have. A man I barely knew stepped beside me. "She scared a lot of us," he said. "That's not an excuse. Just the truth." I nodded. I didn't need more. This wasn't triumph. It was something quieter. The moment when a community realizes it let control replace fairness and finally decides to breathe without it. The county official didn't soften his tone this time. He stepped forward, phone on speaker, and said it plainly so no one could pretend they misunderstood. "The investigation confirms that the HOA president knowingly submitted falsified easement documents." The voice on the call stated, "Those actions constitute fraud and abuse of authority." All eyes drifted to Gwendolyn. She didn't argue. She didn't interrupt. She just stood there, hands gripping the back of a chair, like it was the only thing keeping her upright. "Effective immediately," the voice continued. "Gwendolyn Pritchard is removed from her position. The HOA board is dissolved pending restructuring. Financial penalties and civil charges will follow." A pause. Additionally, the official added, "The arson committed by her son has been formally linked to a pattern of intimidation tied to HOA retaliation." The room went dead silent. Her son has been charged with felony arson and destruction of property. Restitution exceeds 7 figures, and the court has ordered probation, mandatory community service, and a permanent criminal record if conditions are violated. Gwendolyn's face collapsed, not in anger, not in denial, but in understanding. The kind that comes too late. This community will no longer shield personal power behind procedure, the county official finished. Accountability applies to leadership and family alike. No one clapped, because this wasn't about punishment for spectacle. It was about consequences finally matching the damage done. And, for once, they did. No one escorted Gwendolyn out. They didn't need to. She stood there for a moment longer, looking around the room like she was searching for something familiar: support, authority, control. She found none. People didn't glare. They didn't whisper. They simply looked away already, moving on. Outside, the night air felt different, lighter. I walked past the spot where the red boundary flags had once marked my land like a warning. Earlier that afternoon, a county crew had already pulled them out, stacking the metal stakes in the back of a truck, as if they'd never belonged there in the first place. One of the officials handed me a single sheet of paper. "Restoration order," he said. "Your property boundaries are reaffirmed. No future changes without your written consent and an independent survey." I folded it once and slipped it into my pocket. Across the parking lot, Gwendolyn stood alone near her car. Her phone buzzed, unanswered in her hand. No clipboard, no badge, just a private citizen facing consequences she could no longer delegate. I didn't look back. When I got home, I walked the edge of my land slowly, boots crunching on gravel, the quiet uninterrupted. No tape, no signs, no men with vests, just my property, exactly where it had always been. I stopped at the gate, rested my hand on the post, and let the silence settle. Not victory, not revenge. Just ownership returned, respected, and finally unquestioned. Final line: some people lose power loudly, others lose it the moment no one answers to them anymore.